History is bunk. Thus spake Henry Ford, the great industrialist. In 1916, he elaborated, history is more or less bunk. It's tradition. We don't want tradition. We want to live in the present. And the only history that's worth a tinker's damn is the history that we make today. Well, Henry Ford was a genius in his field, in his own way, as well as a demonstration of how a lack of historical perspective can blur the line between genius and dangerous idiot. I, on the other hand, am a historian. On my pretentious days, I can be an historian. I'm a curator at a military history museum, perhaps the token curmudgeon in some ways at this exciting and optimistic event. It's my temperament, my disposition to look at progress as an unfortunate disease that must be managed. But I've been given the privilege of kicking things off. I'd like to do so by encouraging each of you as you move forward, whatever direction forward may be, never to neglect your rearview mirror. We study history for connection. Yes, it is a gloriously misnamed museum that I work for. We are the Confederate Relic Room. There's a difference between an artifact and a relic. Nobody starts a museum today and calls it a relic room. Both are valuable. Both could be the same object. It's in how you approach them. An artifact is something that I look at to learn. It excites my curiosity. I look at the old sword. I want to know about the metallurgy. I want to know about the manufacture. I want to know maybe about its social place and the distinctions it gave the bearer. A relic, that's what pilgrims travel to see at an ancient cathedral. That's when I hold the sword and I say, wow, this thing is a connection. I held Wade Hampton's sword a couple of years ago. I remember it distinctly. We study history for connection. We study history to understand our neighbors. See, human nature has no history. People don't change. The instincts, the behaviors, they express themselves in different ways, but they're still people. If you understand ancient Egyptians, you understand natives of Idaho today to a greater extent. I can't learn about people in the past and identify with them and go through their experiences with them without learning things about our neighbors. These patterns, they stay true, and what we learn about people in the past still applies. We can't change human nature. That's actually, I think, one of the mistakes in history that's worth avoiding. Coming up with this idea of improving people as a whole has led to some of the greatest historical blunders. So I'd like to challenge you to get past chronological arrogance. Anybody ever heard that term? It's a wonderful term. It refers to, and I quote here, our tendency to believe that something is better just because it's more recent. To believe, for instance, that I'm morally superior to a person in the 1700s because I have air conditioning. That I know more about leadership because my professor knew more than his about astronomy. Simply being later in time does not mean we're superior in insight. In fact, it could mean that arrogance will lead us to make blunders we never bothered to learn about. Let's return to Henry Ford, that successful industrialist who declared that history was bunk. He lived in the present. He was going to make history, not study it. Well, how did that work out for him? Well, his creativity, his energy, his success were huge. He changed things quite a bit. He went right on merrily changing the world. Didn't handicap his business. Unfortunately, like many folks who don't develop the big perspective, he was a conspiracy theorist. He bought into ludicrous ideas. It's very easy to misinterpret current events If you're not aware of big historical patterns, you can see malevolent forces hiding in the shadows. Ford was a vicious anti-Semite. He found somebody else who was also another forward-gazing history maker, a short guy, funny mustache, very big on technology, great administrative gifts. In fact, an appreciative Third Reich presented Henry Ford with a medal as it geared up for its great self-defeating endeavor of world conquest and mass murder. If you don't have historical perspective, will you wind up a Nazi collaborator? Probably not. Probably not. But without historical perspective, how will you even know if that's what you've wound up? There are many other well-established follies that you can fall into, and you will enjoy the benefits of improved technology. Don't let those improvements just be a method to make the same old mistakes even faster. Those who fail to study history would be lucky to merely repeat it, because our blunders can be so magnified they're liable to do even worse. So I have a challenge for you. Do I look out here and see a room full of professional historians? Oh, I hope not. I hope not. You bright young people need to go out and make money, great heaping bushels of money. You can spend it on museum memberships and generous donations to historical societies and big, fat, overpriced books written by historians. Besides, when the connection with history is restricted to this arcane priesthood that hides away in the universities and museums, it's not doing any good in the broader world. My challenge is more general. My challenge is in your approach. I want to challenge you to open your minds to old ideas. Master an obsolete skill. Learn to knap flint, or handle a broadsword, or a sewing needle, or something really ancient, a manual typewriter, the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. Ask your grandparents about that one. A guitar made out of a cigar box. Not because we're one electromagnetic pulse away from needing these skills or a zombie apocalypse, rather because you already need them. You need them right now. You need the connection. Go on pilgrimage. Walk out in those historical shoes. You'd be astonished how many great events and battles in our history occurred on national park properties. Take advantage of this coincidence. Go out there where the risks were accepted and the odds were defied, where causes prospered or dreams perished, where unintended consequences galore were inflicted. Share some physical hardships 6 miles away from here. You can go to Congaree Creek and be bitten by mosquitoes descended from the mosquitoes that bit Light Horse Harry Lee, the general who accepted the surrender of a fort out there. For every couple of new books that you read an old one. Maybe one in which the pronouns are not inclusive and no other consideration of your tender sensibilities have been made. I won't say you shouldn't measure these people in these books by your standards. That's why you have standards. But take a minute to measure yourselves by theirs. History is the record, Ambrose Bierce said, mostly false, of events mostly unimportant brought about by rulers, mostly knaves, and soldiers, mostly fools. Look for the truth. Look for the events that were important. At the very least, at that point, you can be a better informed knave when it's your turn to rule, or avoid being a fool whatsoever. But, at best, there's a good chance that when you, too, are history and folks are looking back, they'll want to make that connection with you, and they will look back and see an inspiration, not just another warning. Thank you all very much.